It is time. It is time for the SisCon BroCon show of the season. Yes, Wincest all around. With a title like Days My Stepsister, your expectations are already set. And let's just jump right into it. Opening up the episode saying, my step-sibling is basically a stranger. Yeah, we know where this is going. Oh yeah, by the way, anime and manga always talk about how step-siblings come together. That's not like normal society. Yeah, we know where this is going. You can't fool us. A sister that has totally isolated herself from anybody and the bro comes in to save her. Yeah, we know where this is going. We know exactly where this is going. But no, jokes aside, Days of My Stepsister is a new series coming out in the summer 2024 anime season. I've watched the first 2 episodes of it. The third is available because it was leaked, but I've only watched the first 2 episodes. I figure most people probably haven't watched the 3rd episode at this point. But yes, coming into the show, I had zero expectation. That was because the PV was just blah. Like, nothing in the PV said, come watch this show. And honestly, after watching the first 2 episodes, I think the PV is actually perfect because this show is extremely slow. Not that that's a bad thing. I think that this show is doing a really good job so far of kind of just being normal. Like, there's no like bombasticness to the show. It's just 2 normal kids just kind of figuring each other out. And yes, what comes with like normal people acting normal, it's extremely slow and can be seen as kind of boring. But for me personally, that is one of those aspects of like, if this does get to a punchline, this could nail it really well because of how they've set the mood and how they've slowly kind of progressed in these characters. But the sad reality is that it could also not work, and then I'll feel like I wasted a lot of my time. But to explain that better, let's just get into my first impressions of the first 2 episodes of Days of My Stepsister. Let's jump into it. Days of My Stepsister opens up with Yuta, who his father is getting remarried. And yes, he goes to meet the new family members. And yes, the girl is actually the same age as him. And the new stepmother is actually a bartender that works at night. Very quickly, the stepsister, Saki, ends up pulling Yuta off the side. She says that she's kind of happy that he's not as scary as she thought that he would be. He's actually seems pretty cool. But she basically makes one thing very, very clear to him. I have something very important to tell you. Don't expect anything from me, and I'm not going to expect anything from you. Which this kind of relieves him because he's got a lot of responsibilities on his plate. He's going to school, he's got a job, and yeah, it seems like he's kind of okay with her not really expecting anything or the return. Well, following this, they end up moving into there. He helps her out with unpacking, ends up finding out that she's going to his school. At school, he ends up finding out there's a lot of nasty rumors about her, that she's kind of isolated herself. She only has like one friend, and she doesn't want to really do like sports that are like with groups, which is kind of like him, so they're kind of like in that regard. But yes, there's a lot of nasty rumors that she's selling herself. She's got a lot of piercing, she dressed herself up, and there's a lot of people saying that they've seen her come out of areas that have love hotels. Well, after she asks him for some help in trying to find a job, he ends up kind of finding out that no, she's not actually selling herself, which that's just a whole argument in itself that I'm going to get into eventually, which I really hate. But for the most part, these first 2 episodes is really kind of showing how Saki herself has isolated herself. She doesn't want to rely on other people. She likes to keep people at a distance. She's used to people, spreading rumors, nasty conversations about her mother, and that's kind of applying to herself as well. How nasty people are and how they put labels on other people. Like, if you're not attractive, but you're too smart, you're just snobby. If you're pretty, then you're probably dumb, and you're a gold digger, you're using your body to get ahead. All these different kind of rumors that she's used to, and she's kind of dolled herself up to keep people at a distance and protect herself while she proves them wrong. On Yuta's side, nothing. On Yuta's side, I've really got nothing besides him really relating to her in a lot of regards, like not wanting to do group sports, kind of not wanting to trouble other people and whatnot, but also additionally to how much he's trying to help her out and kind of be there whenever she needs something. And that's basically the gist of the show. My thoughts on Days of My Stepsister. This show, like I said earlier, pacing-wise, I think a lot of people will probably see the show to be extremely, extremely slow. This is a show that's very atmospheric. It's trying to kind of slowly move you into hearing about the characters, their stories, and them slowly kind of seemingly forming a bond, even though it seems like all signs point to them not wanting to have any sort of relationship or reliance on each other. I found it really funny, like early on, Saki's literally saying, don't rely on me, I'm not gonna rely on you. Sure enough, within seconds, she's pouring out her heart. Like, this is a culmination of several moments together where she's just like emotion dumping on him constantly about what she's going through, what her problems are, even though she literally just said, I don't want to rely on you, and don't rely on me. And she constantly says, I don't want to rely on other people. I want to get my own job. I want to be self-sufficient. I don't want to have to burden other people. But also, by the way, I'm going to burden dump everything on you. It doesn't seem like there's a self-awareness here, and that could be for a reason. Saki could literally just be getting comfortable with Yuta, not realizing that she's doing it. She does kind of mention at some point that it would be easier for her if the father and her new stepbrother were less reliable because it's going to make things difficult. Everything's kind of pointing to the idea that Saki just doesn't have a trust for other people. My assumptions right now, my predictions is it's probably the father. Whatever her past father was probably did something bad to them. That's probably why the mother probably left the father. Maybe he abused Saki or something like that, and that's why they had to go on their own. It seemed like she was just fresh out of high school, and she went immediately to be a bartender. So there's a lot of kind of implying here that something didn't really go well in the past, and Saki has kind of guarded herself, which I do appreciate. I think that's kind of a storyline that I think will be really interesting if it's done really well, and it's not too much baiting with the story. Because the problem that I'm finding so far, like I joked about earlier with the idea of just kind of trauma dumping and emotion dumping, even though she says she doesn't want to rely on him, how much Saki is guarded can eventually lead into a really emotional punchline because it feels like she's so unguarded around Yuta. Yuta is breaking down those barriers that she has and showing her that she can in fact rely on somebody. She's broken ties with all of her friends but one of them. She literally dresses the way that she dresses in order to push people away. She wants to get a job so that she can live out on her own. She doesn't even want to be a burden upon her mother or her new family. She just does not want to connect with people. And it all seems like it's kind of building up with this presumption that everybody is going to attack her and that everybody has this negative feeling around her and even her mother. This desire for herself to build up to something to prove everybody wrong, but during that process, burning any bridge that she'll ever have with any sort of relationship with anybody. Even though, again, it seems like she's not even realizing that she's opening that door to Yuta and only acknowledging it here recently. Again, it could do something really good, and it's a very slow and gradual process that I hope has a really solid punchline. Otherwise, I feel like I've wasted a lot of time watching this show because it is going so slow. Like I joked about earlier, my biggest problem that I think I have so far with this show is that Yuta is just blah. He's literally just the therapist sitting there to absorb Saki. He has no personality. He has no traits to himself. He's just literally, I'm here to be the good guy to save you. I work and go to school. What do you need? What do you need? And I think that's the biggest problem I had. I felt that he had a character early on because when he first brings her in, it was like, yeah, I'm relieved that you don't need anything from me or that I won't need anything from you. He's overly formal with her when she first moves in, obviously probably to make sure that she doesn't feel unsafe or uncomfortable. He's being very overly polite as he welcomes her into the room. He helps her unpack things and even expresses the idea of possibly whether they would want to know each other or not in school. But then after that point, it feels like it kind of just breaks off. There are some brief moments with him and his coworker that feels like it gets a little bit into his character, but for the most part, he just feels like he's just there. Like he has nothing going for him. But that sort of comes with what I think this entire series is doing so far, or at least the adaptation is doing so far, is really presenting these characters as real. And I think that's going to probably be the biggest hang-up point for a lot of people watching this show is that I feel personally, despite the constant baiting trauma and not really getting into it, these characters feel very, very real. They're not bombastic. Yuta's not constantly walking in on Saki when she's changing. There's not a lot of comedy routines. There's very little comedy whatsoever. It's very grounded down slice of life stuff here. But what comes from that, like I said, is that these characters aren't like super likable. I can feel like a lot of people are probably going to obviously like Saki because she's super garu and super cute and she's vulnerable and wants people to help her out even though she doesn't want to. I can fix her, I can help her situation here. But outside of that, the characters are extremely normal. And for a lot of people, that's probably going to be a huge hang-up point for even enjoying the show. Because let's face it, being normal is extremely boring. But again, like I said earlier, if it gets to a payoff, I don't mind that. I actually think it feels more grounded and more real so that when that payoff happens, it'll be that much more impactful and believable. The biggest problem that I personally have for this series so far is that it feels like it's baiting way too much. There's too much emphasis on issues while never actually getting into the issue. There's too much talking about something but never getting to the core of what that something is. Yes, I don't expect them to unravel every secret of their stories within the first 2 episodes, while at the same time, I don't want them to constantly tease things that don't actually exist. Prime example is the whole selling herself thing. I really hated the scene with Yuta and Saki talking about work. And yes, part of that I think is because of the translation, a lost in translation issue here, but it really felt cheap. It really felt cheap because it was overly translating into a way of saying literally this is happening while it's not really happening. It's sort of a situation of, I think, presenting oneself, not necessarily selling oneself. But whether it was well translated or not, that's what the scene was doing, and I felt it was extremely cheap to the point where, why did we even bother with this? My other issue that I have is, while I said earlier that the show is very slow, like the character and the progression of the story is very slow, each scene is very atmospheric, it kind of just lets you settle in the scene itself. Like, they had this very long segment where Saki gets out of the bath, and she spends a long time trying to figure out where the light switches are. Again, for some people, they'll see that as a waste of time. I feel it's perfect in portraying how Saki is in a place where she's not used to. So these long, drawn-out scenes are actually very atmospheric and storytelling in a way of show, don't tell. It's actually something I really like. And while I can give a lot of examples of where it has those really drawn-out, very atmospheric moments of show, don't tell, the opposite happens where it feels like it's jumping forward as well. Like later in the second episode, there's a crosswalk scene where something is coming down the road and going to hit Saki. And then it jumps forward. It doesn't really tell you how the scene is resolved. It doesn't show the whole conversation there. It just shows the aftermath. Same thing with the whole situation of selling yourself versus presenting yourself. There's a very important conversation happening here, but then it just jumps forward. It doesn't tell you what happened or what they were talking about or how they resolved the conversation. And I don't know if that's present in the light novel or if it's the Studio Dean's messing it up or what, but it just feels very kind of jarring. Visually, it's a mixed bag. It is a very mixed bag. There's times where Studio Dean is doing some really clever and atmospheric stuff here, whereas other times it feels extremely cheap and just blah. Like there's a whole scene where Yuta is at work and he's talking to his coworker, and at some point it just shows the bookshelves with people and it just looks flat as all get, and then it cuts to another angle next to him and it looks like he's inside of a plain box. The backgrounds are just a mixed bag. Like most of the time it just looks incredibly flat. But then there's other shots that are very beautiful and they're very creative and very atmospheric. So it's like it's a very mixed bag, the quality of what Dean is doing here. Overall, I'm enjoying the series. I think it has a lot of potential, mainly in the idea that these characters feel very grounded. Their conversations, for the most part, feel very real. They feel very normal is the key thing there. They feel normal. And there's a lot of discussion here about trauma, not being able to trust other people, the destructions of whatever trust you had before possibly being bearing down on them, the labels that people put on other people, the judgments that people make upon people because their looks or how intelligent they are. There's a lot of discussion here that could be had, again, as long as it really does nail it in the end. I don't want this to turn into one of those cases where I want to invest into it and in the end it doesn't give me enough reward for kind of investing into the story that is, let's face it, very, very slow. We'll see how it turns out. I'm looking forward to more of it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to like button down below. Comment, let me know what you think of the series so far if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top lists. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have Patreon link, tips, links, so thanks, membership button below. Greatly appreciate it if it does. Y'all take care.